My wife served me divorce papers on my 50th birthday. "You're broke. You're old. You're nothing," she said. She took everything, my house, my business, my daughter's laughter. I was living in my office, sleeping on a couch that smelled of coffee and defeat. When I found an old leather briefcase, it had a note from my mentor who died in 2009. Inside, one line: "When your life falls apart, go to locker 243 at Union Station." I went there, and what I found changed everything. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. My name is Jonathan Hale, and on the morning of my 50th birthday, I woke up on the leather couch in my office with a crick in my neck and the bitter taste of yesterday's coffee in my mouth. It was March 15th, the Ides of March. "Beware the Ides of March," Shakespeare wrote. Caesar should have listened. I should have known better too. I'd been sleeping in my office for 3 weeks, ever since Evelyn changed the locks on our house. Our house. The 3-bedroom colonial in Oak Park that we'd bought when Sophie was born 10 years ago, back when life made sense and the future looked bright. We'd spent weekends painting every room, arguing happily about colors. "Sage green or seafoam?" Evelyn had asked, holding up paint chips in the nursery. I'd pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "Whatever you want, honey. It'll be perfect either way." And it had been perfect for a while. That house had witnessed our daughter's first steps across the hardwood floors we'd refinished ourselves. Her first words, "Dada," before Mama, which Evelyn pretended to be annoyed about but secretly loved. Birthday parties with too much cake and too many kids running through the rooms. Christmas mornings with Sophie shrieking in delight at presents under the tree. Ordinary evenings reading bedtime stories, the 3 of us piled together on the couch, a family. Except it wasn't our house anymore. According to Evelyn's lawyer, a shark named Mitchell Brennan, who charged $650 an hour to destroy lives and apparently loved every minute of it, it was her house now. Temporarily, pending the divorce proceedings, but we both knew temporary meant permanent. In 3 weeks, I'd already gotten notice that she was planning to sell it, split the equity, use her half for a down payment somewhere else, somewhere I'd never been, somewhere Sophie would call home without me. I sat up slowly, my back screaming in protest. 50 years old and sleeping on a couch was not what my body had been designed for. Everything hurt. My neck, my shoulders, my lower back. I felt every one of those 50 years, plus another decade. I looked around the office that had become my entire world. Hale Logistics occupied 200 square feet on the 3rd floor of a building in the West Loop. Nothing fancy, but it had been mine. Gray commercial carpet that had seen better days, fluorescent lights that flickered occasionally, 3 desks that used to have employees sitting at them before I'd had to let everyone go, filing cabinets full of contracts that were now worthless paper, a coffee maker that was the only appliance I still owned, and windows that looked out onto the Chicago skyline I'd once thought would be mine, or at least something I'd be part of. The morning light filtered through those windows now, harsh and unforgiving, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air and the general shabbiness of a place where dreams had gone to die. I'd built this company from nothing. Absolutely nothing. In 2005, I was 27 years old with a degree in supply chain management and $8,000 in savings. I rented this space, bought used furniture, and started cold calling manufacturers who needed help managing their shipping and logistics. For 13 years, it worked. Not spectacularly, I wasn't getting rich, but steadily. We had good clients. Boeing's regional office, several pharmaceutical companies, a handful of tech startups. At our peak, we did $2.3 million in annual revenue with 6 employees and healthy margins. I wasn't wealthy, but I was respected. I could pay my mortgage, take my family on vacation, put money away for Sophie's college fund. I was building something. Then 2018 happened. The trade wars started. Tariffs went into effect. Supply chains that had been smooth for decades suddenly became minefields of uncertainty. Shipping costs spiked. My clients started consolidating, looking for bigger logistics firms with more resources and negotiating power. One by one, the contracts ended. Boeing moved to a national provider. The pharma companies merged their logistics operations in-house. The startups ran out of funding. By early 2019, we were down to 2 clients. By June, we were down to 1. By September, we were done. I laid off my employees, emptied the 401k to make payroll and give them severance, maxed out every credit card keeping the lights on, hoping I could land one more big contract, turn it around, save everything. I didn't save anything. By December, I had $600,000 in business debt, another $200,000 in personal debt from keeping the company afloat, and no income. The house went into foreclosure. The cars got repossessed. And Evelyn, who'd been my college sweetheart, my wife of 12 years, my partner through everything, looked at me like I was a stranger she couldn't wait to be rid of. "How did you let this happen?" she'd asked one night in January, her voice cold and clinical. "How did you destroy everything we built?" "I was trying to save it," I said. "I thought if I could just hold on a little longer." "You were supposed to be smart, Jonathan. You were supposed to provide for us. Instead, you gambled everything and lost." She'd already talked to a lawyer by then. I could see it in her eyes. 3 weeks ago, she made it official. Changed the locks. Told me I wasn't welcome in my own home. Said if I tried to see Sophie without scheduled supervision, she'd get a restraining order. So I moved into my office. The one asset Evelyn's lawyer hadn't gotten to yet because technically it was business property, not marital. I slept on the couch, showered at the gym down the street, ate $1 menu items and whatever the church food pantry gave out on Thursday afternoons, and I waited for something to change. Some miracle. Some sign that this wasn't the end of everything. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother Alex, who lived in Seattle. "Happy birthday, man. Hang in there." That's right. It was my birthday. 50 years old today. I texted back, "Thanks." What else was there to say? I made coffee in the break room. The machine was the one nice thing I had left, and sat at my desk staring at the skyline and wondering what the hell I was supposed to do now. File bankruptcy, find a job, start over at 50. That's when I heard the knock. I looked up to see a man in a suit standing outside my glass door. He was holding a manila envelope and a clipboard. Process server. I knew before I even opened the door. "Jonathan Hale? That's me? You've been served." He handed me the envelope and left without another word. Inside were divorce papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Evelyn Margaret Hale versus Jonathan Michael Hale. And a handwritten note on expensive stationery, Evelyn's perfect cursive, "Happy birthday, Jonathan." Consider this your gift. I'm done waiting for you to become something you're clearly not. You're broke, you're old, you're nothing, I deserve better, and so does Sophie. Don't fight this. You have nothing left to fight with. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. You're nothing. I'd lost the business, lost the house, lost my daughter's daily presence, her voice calling Daddy when I came home, her small hand in mine, her laugh that sounded like bells. But I thought, stupidly, naively, that maybe Evelyn and I could survive this. That once the dust settled, once I rebuilt, we could find our way back to each other. She just made it clear there was no way back. There was only this, the end of everything. I sat at my desk with those divorce papers in my hands and felt something break inside me. Not dramatically, not like in the movies where people scream or throw things. Just a quiet, final breaking, like a bone that's been fractured for months finally snapping clean through. I was 50 years old, divorced, broke, alone, sleeping on an office couch. I was nothing. For 3 days, I didn't move, didn't answer the phone, didn't eat much, just sat in my office, sleeping on the couch, staring at the walls, waiting for the motivation to sign the divorce papers, file for bankruptcy, and figure out what comes after you've lost everything. On the 4th day, a Saturday, I forced myself to clean. Not because I cared about the state of the office, but because the landlord had sent an email saying my lease was up in 2 months and I needed to be out. Time to start packing. I worked methodically, boxing up files, old equipment, the detritus of a failed business. Most of it would go to the dumpster. Some of it, client files, tax documents, needed to go into storage in case the bankruptcy trustee wanted to see them. Around 3 p.m., I was clearing out the closet in my private office. Really just a glorified supply closet where I'd stored things I didn't know what else to do with. When I found it, a leather briefcase, old, expensive-looking, with brass hardware that had tarnished with age. It was shoved in the back behind boxes of old letterhead and promotional materials I'd never used. I pulled it out, surprised by its weight. Dust covered the top so thick I had to wipe it away to see the monogram stamped into the leather, ERL, Edward Langston. My heart did something strange in my chest. Edward Langston had been my mentor. More than that, he'd been the person who made me believe I could build something. He was in his 60s when I met him in 2003, a legendary figure in the logistics world. He'd built and sold 3 companies, made a fortune, lost half of it in a bad investment, made it back again. When I was 25 and trying to figure out if I had what it took to start a business, Edward had taken me under his wing, met with me every week for coffee, reviewed my business plans, introduced me to potential clients, invested in me, not money, but something more valuable. His time, his knowledge, his belief that I could succeed. "Jonathan," he'd said once, his eyes twinkling over his coffee cup, Success isn't about never failing. It's about failing forward. Every mistake teaches you something. The question is, are you paying attention? He died in 2009. Heart attack, sudden and brutal. He was 71. I'd been devastated. Spoke at his funeral. Told stories about how he'd changed my life. His daughter gave me this briefcase at the funeral. "Dad wanted you to have it," she'd said. "He admired you so much." I'd taken it home, set it in my office closet, and never opened it. It felt sacred somehow. Too precious to disturb. I'd always meant to someday when I was ready. 9 years later, here it was. I set it on my desk and stared at it for a long moment. Then, with trembling hands, I unlatched the brass clasps. Inside was a leather portfolio, empty except for a few papers. And underneath that, something wrapped in cloth. I picked up the papers first. The top sheet was a letter, handwritten on Edward's personal stationery. The date? November 14th, 2008, 4 months before he died. The handwriting was shaky. He must have already been sick, though I didn't know it at the time. But the words were clear. "Dear Jonathan, if you're reading this, then you're either very curious or something has gone wrong. I'm betting on the latter. You were never one to pry into things that weren't your business. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I know that, because I'm writing this from my hospital bed, and the doctors have given me 6 months at most. They were optimistic. I give myself 3. I've watched you build your business, Jonathan. Watched you grow from an eager kid with a dream into a man who keeps his word, treats people fairly, and builds something real. I'm proud of you, but I also know how the world works. I know that sometimes, even when you do everything right, it all falls apart anyway. Markets crash, clients leave, life happens. If you're reading this, it means your life has fallen apart. I'm sorry for that, but I'm also not surprised. Building something always means risking everything. So here's what I need you to do. Take the key that's wrapped in this briefcase. When you are at your lowest, when you think you have nothing left, go to Union Station in Kansas City. Find locker 243. Use the key. Don't question it. Don't wait. Just go. Trust me one more time. Your friend, Edward Langston, P.S. The briefcase itself is yours, too. Hermes 1960s cost me $4,000 even back then. Might be worth something now. Sell it if you need to. Or keep it as a reminder that value isn't always obvious. I sat back, my hands shaking so badly the letter rattled. Union Station, Kansas City, locker 243. I unwrapped the cloth, an old silk handkerchief, and found a small brass key, the old-fashioned kind with an ornate head and a long shaft. A tag attached to it had faded writing, 2143, U.S. Old KC. This was insane. Edward had been dead for 9 years. Why would he leave me a key to a locker in Kansas City? What could possibly be there after all this time? But then again, what did I have to lose? I was 50 years old, divorced, broke, living in my office with an eviction notice coming in 2 months. I was already at rock bottom. A trip to Kansas City couldn't make things worse. And Edward had never steered me wrong before. I bought a plane ticket to Kansas City for $180 on a credit card that wasn't quite maxed out yet, one of the few that still had a little breathing room. One way, because I honestly didn't know if I'd be coming back. Maybe I'd just keep going, disappearing into the American heartland, finding some small town where nobody knew me and starting over with a new name. Jonathan Hale could cease to exist. Maybe that would be easier than trying to rebuild from these ashes. The flight left O'Hare at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning in late March. I'd barely slept the night before, 2 hours, maybe 3, lying on that couch thinking about Edward's letter, about the key, about what might be waiting in that locker, or more likely, what wouldn't be waiting. This felt like a fool's errand, chasing a dead man's instructions written 9 years ago. For all I knew, the locker didn't exist anymore, or had been cleared out, or Edward's prepayment had run out years ago. But what else did I have? Where else was I supposed to go? I went through security at O'Hare at 5 a.m., joining the river of business travelers in their suits, pulling their carry-ons, checking their phones, living lives that still had purpose and direction. I was wearing the same jeans I'd worn for 3 days, a flannel shirt that needed washing, and sneakers that were falling apart. I looked like exactly what I was, a man at the end of his rope. The flight was half empty. I sat in a middle seat near the back, the only seat available on the cheap ticket, between a woman in business attire who immediately put in earbuds and closed her eyes, and a college kid who spent the entire flight playing games on his phone. I stared out the small window at the dawn breaking over Lake Michigan as we took off, the city sprawling below me, and wondered if this was the last time I'd see Chicago, the city where I'd built my life, my business, my family, the city where I'd failed, The flight took just over an hour. We landed at Kansas City International, a strange, dated airport that felt stuck in the 1970s, and I shuffled off the plane with everyone else through the terminal to the rental car area. The cheapest car available was a silver Kia Rio with 80,000 miles and a persistent smell of air freshener trying to cover up something that smelled like old French fries. It cost $39.99 per day, and I had to put a $200 deposit on the credit card, which made my stomach clench. That was $200 I didn't have if something went wrong. But I took the keys, got in the car, and drove into Kansas City. I'd been here twice before, both times for business. Once in 2012 to meet with a potential client, a pharmaceutical distribution company that eventually went with a larger firm, and once in 2015 for a logistics conference where I'd made some good connections that led to actual contracts. Both times, I'd stayed in nice hotels, eaten at good restaurants, seen the city through the lens of a successful businessman on a business trip. I'd barely seen it at all, really. Just conference rooms and hotel lobbies and client offices. Now I drove through it as something else, a desperate man chasing a ghost's promise. The morning was cold and gray, typical Midwest late March. Not quite spring yet, winter refusing to let go. I drove south from the airport, following GPS on my phone, through industrial areas and residential neighborhoods, past schools where kids were arriving for class, past strip malls and gas stations and the ordinary infrastructure of a city going about its Monday morning. Union Station appeared suddenly as I came over a rise, an enormous, stately building that looked like it belonged to another era. I'd read about it once, years ago, in some business magazine article about historic renovations. Built in 1914 during the golden age of rail travel, nearly demolished in the 1970s when rail travel died and the building fell into disrepair. Saved by citizens who couldn't bear to lose it, renovated in the 1990s at massive cost, turned into a mixed-use space with museums, restaurants, event venues, and still, remarkably, an active Amtrak station. I parked in the garage and sat in the car for a long moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe normally. This was it. This was the moment. Whatever Edward had left me, if he'd left me anything, was inside that building. I got out of the car, locked it, and walked toward the entrance. The building was even more impressive up close. Limestone facade, arched windows, details that spoke of craftsmen who took pride in their work. I pulled open the heavy doors and stepped inside. The grand hall hit me like a physical force. The ceiling soared 95 feet above me. I'd looked it up on my phone during the flight, coffered and ornate with architectural details that no modern building would ever have. Not because we couldn't build them, but because we wouldn't. Too expensive, too impractical, too beautiful for our utilitarian age. Light poured through the massive 3-story limestone and glass windows, illuminating the terrazzo floor worn smooth by 100 years of travelers. The space echoed with history. You could almost hear the ghosts. Soldiers leaving for World War I, faces young and scared and determined. Families reuniting after the war, tears and laughter mixing together. The jazz-age crowds in flapper dresses and sharp suits. Depression-era travelers with everything they owned in a single battered suitcase. More soldiers leaving for World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Generations of Americans passing through this exact space. Their lives changing at this crossroads. I stood there in the middle of the grand hall, feeling very small and very insignificant, and realized I was crying. Not sobbing, just tears running down my face that I couldn't control. A security guard noticed me standing motionless and walked over. He was older, maybe 65, African-American with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "You okay, sir?" he asked quietly. "I'm looking for the lockers," I managed. "The storage lockers." He pointed across the hall. "Over there, past the information desk and down that corridor to the right. But I gotta warn you, those are old. Don't know if they're all still in use. Some been sitting empty for years." "This one's been paid for," I said. 15 years in advance. His eyebrows rose. "Well then, sounds like someone wanted to make sure it'd be waiting. Good luck, sir." "Thank you." I walked across the grand hall. It felt like walking across a cathedral, my footsteps echoing on the terrazzo floor. Past the information desk where a young woman was helping tourists with directions. Down the corridor to the right, where the lighting was dimmer, more industrial. The locker area was tucked away, easily missed if you weren't looking for it. Rows of old metal lockers, the kind that had been installed during the 1990s renovation. Beige metal, about 3 feet tall, 2 feet wide. Most had rust spots. Many looked like they hadn't been opened in years. Spider webs in the corners, dust thick on the surfaces. I walked down the row slowly, checking numbers. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. 220, 225, 230. I turned the corner. More lockers. 235. 238. 240. I stopped, stared at it. It looked like all the others, beige metal, showing its age with a simple lock mechanism. Nothing special about it. Nothing that would indicate it held anything life-changing. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the brass key Edward had left in the briefcase. The key felt warm in my hand, or maybe that was just my imagination. I stepped forward, slid the key into the lock. It went in smoothly, easily, like it had been waiting for this exact key, this exact moment, for 9 years. I turned it. The lock clicked. The door swung open with a slight creak of hinges that hadn't moved in years. Inside was another briefcase. Black leather, modern, maybe 10 years old, nothing like Edward's vintage Hermes. This was functional, professional, the kind a businessman would carry. And taped to the top of the briefcase was an envelope. White, business-sized, with my name written across it in Edward's distinctive handwriting. Jonathan Michael Hale. My hands shook as I reached for it. The envelope felt substantial, like there were multiple pages inside. I couldn't open it here. Couldn't read whatever Edward had written in this dim corridor with strangers passing by. I needed privacy, space to process whatever came next. I pulled the briefcase out of the locker. It was heavy, like there was something substantial inside, closed the locker door, pocketed the key, and carried the briefcase out of that corridor, back through the grand hall, looking for somewhere quiet. I found a small seating area near the Kansas City Museum entrance, a few tables and chairs where people could work or wait. At 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, it was nearly empty. Just me and one other person, an elderly woman knitting while waiting for something. I sat down at a corner table, set the briefcase in front of me, and just stared at it for a moment. This was it. Whatever Edward had left me, whatever message he'd written, whatever hope he'd tried to give me, it was inside this envelope. My hands were still shaking as I carefully peeled back the tape and opened the envelope. Inside were several pages, handwritten on Edward's personal stationery. I recognized the paper, cream-colored, heavy stock, with his initials embossed at the top. The handwriting was shaky. He must have been very sick when he wrote this, but still legible. I started reading. Jonathan, if you're reading this, you made it. You trusted me one more time, even though I'm sure it felt crazy. Thank you for that. Let me tell you a story. In 1987, I made my first $1 million selling my logistics company. I thought I was brilliant. I thought I'd figured out the secret to success. So I immediately invested most of it in a commercial real estate deal that a friend recommended, warehouses in Cleveland. Can't miss, he said. It missed, spectacularly. The market crashed, the deal went bad, and within 8 months I'd lost $700,000. I was 49 years old and nearly broke. My wife left me, my friends stopped calling. I thought about driving my car off a bridge. I didn't. Instead, I did something smarter. I got humble. I stopped pretending I knew everything. I started learning from my mistakes. I started small again. Over the next 15 years, I rebuilt. Built 2 more companies, made back everything I'd lost, and then some. But more importantly, I learned what actually mattered. And what I learned was this: the people who survive aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who get up one more time. So here's what I did. In 2006, when I sold my third company, I put $500,000 into a private investment trust. Conservative investments, dividend stocks, bonds, some real estate investment trusts. Nothing flashy. Just steady, reliable growth. I never touched it. Just let it sit there, compounding year after year. That trust had one beneficiary. You. I set it up to become accessible if and when you needed it most. I paid for that locker for 15 years in advance, gambling that if you ever truly hit bottom, you'd remember this letter and come looking. The USB drive contains all the account information. Account numbers, passwords, contact information for the trustee, everything you need. As of November 2008, that account held approximately $800,000. With conservative growth over the years, it should be substantially more by the time you're reading this. Why you? Why not my own children? Because my children are wealthy. They inherited everything else. They'll be fine. But you remind me of me. The good parts, I hope. The parts that believe hard work and integrity matter, even when the world seems determined to prove otherwise. This isn't charity, Jonathan. This is an investment. I'm betting on you one more time. Use this money wisely. Rebuild if you want. Start something new. Or just breathe for a while and figure out who you are when you're not fighting to survive. But here's the only condition. Pass it forward. When you're successful again, and you will be, find someone else who deserves a chance. Be be their Edward Langston. I believed in you when you were 25 and had nothing but dreams. I believe in you now, even though I'm not there to see it. Get back up, Jonathan. One more time. Your friend, Edward. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I just sat there, staring at the letter, at the USB drive, at the briefcase. $800,000 in 2008. With even modest growth, 5% annually, that would be... I pulled out my phone, opened the calculator app. My hands were shaking so badly I kept hitting the wrong numbers. $800,000 compounded at 5% annually for 11 years. The number appeared 1,361,468, over $1 million. But Edward had said conservative growth. What if it was more? What if the trustee had done well? What if... I needed to know. Right now. There was a business center in the station, a small room with computers and printers for travelers who needed them. I paid $10 for 30 minutes, plugged in the USB drive, and opened the files. There were PDFs of account statements, legal documents establishing the trust, contact information for the trustee, a firm called Langston Financial Management in Kansas City. Edward's own company, or what remained of it. I opened the most recent account statement, dated December 31st, 2018, just 3 months ago. The total balance appeared at the top of the page, $247,392.68. I stared at it. The number didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. I scrolled through the statement. The investments were exactly what Edward had described. Dividend aristocrat stocks, bond funds, REITs, nothing exotic. Just steady, reliable investments that had compounded over 11 years. $500,000 had become $2.8 million, and according to the documents, I was the sole beneficiary. Edward had set it up so that upon accessing the locker, I could contact the trustee, verify my identity, and the funds would be transferred to an account of my choosing. I sat in that business center in Union Station, in a city I barely knew, staring at a computer screen showing numbers that represented more money than I'd ever had in my life. And I cried. Not quiet tears, full, body-shaking sobs that I couldn't control. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep, from a place you didn't know existed until something breaks it open. An employee knocked on the door. "Sir, are you okay?" "Yes," I managed. "Yes, I'm fine. I'm sorry. I'm fine." She looked uncertain but left me alone. I pulled myself together, printed the documents, made the phone call to Langston Financial Management. A woman answered. "Langston Financial, this is Patricia." "Hi, my name is Jonathan Hale. I was told to call this number regarding a trust." "One moment, please." A pause. "Jonathan Hale." "Yes, I have your file right here. We've been expecting your call." "Well, not expecting exactly, but hoping. Mr. Langston left instructions that you might reach out someday. Can you verify some information for me?" She asked questions. My date of birth, my social security number, information only I would know. I answered them all. "Excellent. And do you have the access code from the USB drive?" I found it in one of the documents. LHL 2847JMH. "Perfect. Mr. Hale, I'm looking at your account and the current balance is $247,392.68. Per Mr. Langston's instructions, you can direct us to transfer these funds to any account you specify. We'll need you to come to our office to sign some paperwork and verify your identity in person, but that's just a formality. This money is yours." "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking. "Why would he do this?" Patricia's voice softened. "I met Mr. Langston several times before he passed. He talked about you often. He said you were the son he would have wanted. He said if anyone deserved a second chance, it was you. We made an appointment for the next morning. I hung up and sat there in that business center, surrounded by the muted sounds of a train station, and tried to process what had just happened. Edward Langston, dead for 9 years, had just saved my life. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. My mind raced with possibilities, fears, questions. Was this real? Would it somehow fall through? Would I get to that office tomorrow and find out it was a mistake, or that there were taxes and fees that would consume most of it, or that I'd misread something? I'd gotten a hotel room, a nice one, for the first time in months, at the Westin Crown Center. It cost $140 and felt like pure luxury. A real bed, a shower with good water pressure, room service that I ordered without looking at the price. But I couldn't sleep. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, holding the USB drive like a talisman. At 9 a.m. the next morning, I walked into the offices of Langston Financial Management. They occupied a suite in a modern building downtown, with views of the city and tasteful decor that spoke of quiet wealth. Patricia greeted me personally, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Mr. Hale, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Edward spoke of you so often." "He did?" "Oh, yes. You were one of his favorite success stories. He used to say you had more integrity in your little finger than most CEOs had in their entire body." She led me to a conference room. Can I get you coffee, water?" "Coffee would be great." We spent the next 2 hours going through paperwork, verifying my identity with my driver's license, passport, and social security card, reviewing the trust documents, discussing my options. "The money is yours to do with as you please," Patricia explained. "Edward put no restrictions on it except one. He asked that you consider helping others the way he helped you. But that's a request, not a legal requirement." "I'll honor it," I said. "He saved my life. The least I can do is pass it forward." She smiled. "He said you'd say that." By noon, the money was transferred to a new account I'd opened at a major bank. $2,047,392.68, minus some small administrative fees, minus the taxes I'd owe on it as income. Even after taxes, I was looking at roughly $1.8 million. More money than I'd ever had. More money than I'd thought I'd ever have. Patricia walked me to the door. "What will you do now?" "I have no idea," I admitted. "I need to think." "Take your time. And Mr. Hale? Edward would want you to know. You earned this. Not by luck, but by being the kind of person worth investing in. Don't forget that." I flew back to Chicago that afternoon, this time business class, because why not? I could afford it now. On the plane, I made a list. Pay off all debt, personal and business. Pay our $800,000. Find an apartment, real one, not my office. Call a divorce lawyer, a good one this time. Figure out custody arrangements for Sophie. Decide what to do about the business. Figure out the rest of my life. The list felt overwhelming and liberating at the same time. When I landed at O'Hare, I had 17 missed calls from Evelyn. No voicemails, just calls. I didn't call back, not yet. Instead, I went to my office, sat at my desk, and looked around at the space that had been my prison for the last 3 weeks. It didn't have to be a prison anymore. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. Not a public defender or legal aid attorney, but Mitchell Brennan's equal. A man named David Kozlowski, who'd built his reputation destroying people like Mitchell Brennan. We met in his office, a suite in the Willis Tower with views that made my old office look like a closet. "Mr. Hale," he said, reviewing the divorce papers Evelyn had served me. "Tell me everything." I did. The business failure, the debt, Evelyn leaving, the custody situation with Sophie, the birthday divorce papers. He listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he looked up. "And your financial situation now?" "Changed. Significantly." I explained about Edward's trust, about the $2.8 million, about what I had left after taxes. David smiled. Not kindly, more like a shark spotting blood in the water. "Mr. Hale, I think we're going to get along very well. Here's what we're going to do." Over the next week, David got to work. He filed a response to the divorce petition that made it clear I wasn't rolling over. He requested a fair division of assets, including the house, which was in both our names. He requested shared custody of Sophie, and he let Mitchell Brennan know that I wasn't broke anymore, that if Evelyn wanted to fight, I could fight back. Properly. The response was swift. Mitchell called David. They had a conversation I wasn't privy to. Then David called me. "Evelyn wants to talk. She's suddenly very interested in settling this amicably." "Of course she is. Do you want to talk to her?" I thought about it. About the woman who'd handed me divorce papers on my birthday with a note calling me nothing. About the years we'd spent together that apparently meant nothing once the money was gone. "No," I said. "You handle it. Get me fair custody of Sophie. I want her at least half the time. Beyond that, I don't care what Evelyn gets. She can have the house. I'll buy another one." "You're sure? That house is worth $600,000. "I'm sure. I don't want to live in a house full of memories of someone who never really loved me. Just get me my daughter." The second thing I did was pay off every penny of debt. I wired $600,000 to the business creditors, another $200,000 to the personal credit cards and loans, watched the balances go to zero, and felt a weight lift that I'd been carrying for 2 years. The third thing I did was find an apartment, a real one, in Lincoln Park, 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for Sophie. It had hardwood floors, big windows, and a doorman named Marcus, who reminded me of Edward, older, kind, the type who remembered your name. The rent was $3,200 a month, which was more than I'd ever paid for housing, but I could afford it now, and it felt like home in a way nowhere had felt like home in years. The fourth thing I did was the hardest. I went to see Sophie. Evelyn had agreed to let me see her. David had made that happen, threatening a custody battle she couldn't afford now that I had resources. We arranged to meet at a park near Evelyn's house on a Saturday afternoon. I got there early and waited on a bench, my heart pounding, wondering if Sophie would even remember me after 3 weeks of separation, wondering if Evelyn had poisoned her against me, wondering if I'd lost my daughter forever. Then I saw them. Evelyn walking across the grass, and beside her, holding her hand, my little girl. Sophie was 10 years old, all long legs and dark hair like her mother, with my gray-green eyes and my stubborn chin. She wore jeans and a purple jacket and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. When she saw me, she stopped, just froze, her eyes going wide. "Sophie!" I called, standing up from the bench. For a moment, nothing. Then she broke free from Evelyn's hand and ran toward me, full speed, and I dropped to my knees and caught her as she threw herself into my arms. Daddy, I missed you so much. Where have you been? Mom said you had to go away for work, but I knew that wasn't true, and I wanted to call, but she said I couldn't, and... Shh, baby, it's okay. I'm here. I'm here now." She was crying, and so was I, holding each other in a park while spring sunshine filtered through the trees, and Evelyn watched from 30 feet away, her expression unreadable. We spent 2 hours together that afternoon. Walked around the park, got ice cream, sat on the swings. Sophie talked nonstop, about school, about her friends, about the math test she'd aced, about the book she was reading. "Are you coming home?" she finally asked, her voice small. "Are you and Mom going to fix things?" I looked at her, this beautiful, innocent child who deserved so much better than 2 parents who couldn't make it work, and chose honesty over comfort. "No, baby. Mom and I are getting divorced, but that doesn't change anything about how much I love you, not one bit." "Is it because we're poor now?" The question hit like a punch. "Who told you that?" "Mom said we lost all our money because your business failed. She said we can't afford things anymore. She said..." Sophie looked down. "She said you weren't a good provider." I felt anger rise, hot and sharp, but pushed it down. This wasn't Sophie's fault. "Baby, listen to me. Your mom and I are having grown-up problems that have nothing to do with you, and we're not poor. Things are actually getting better. In fact, I found a new apartment, and I set up a bedroom for you. You'll stay with me sometimes, okay?" "Really?" "Really. Starting next weekend if your mom agrees." Evelyn did agree. By the time David finished negotiating, I had Sophie every other week, plus Wednesday dinners. Not perfect, but better than nothing. Better than being shut out of her life. The fifth thing I did was decide what to do about Hale Logistics. I could have just shut it down, let the lease expire, walked away, started something new. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I still believed in this business. I'd built something real once. I could do it again. But not as Hale Logistics. That name carried too much baggage, too many failed contracts and disappointed clients. I needed something new, a fresh start. I thought about Edward, about his belief in me, about the gift he'd given me, not just money, but a second chance. I filed papers for a new LLC, Langston Freight Group. Edward would have liked that. 6 months later, I stood in the new offices of Langston Freight Group, looking out the windows at the Chicago River, and marveled at how much had changed. The office space was in River North, 2,000 square feet with modern furniture, good computers, and 4 employees. I'd hired carefully this time, people with experience, people I trusted, people who believed in building something sustainable rather than chasing explosive growth. We'd landed 3 solid contracts, not huge, but stable. Manufacturers who needed logistics support. We were profitable within month 3, not rich, but growing steadily. I'd paid off every debt. I had money in the bank, I had my daughter in my life. She stayed with me every other week, and those weeks were the best weeks of my life. We cooked dinner together, watched movies, did homework at the kitchen table. I was getting to know her again. The divorce had been finalized a month ago. Evelyn got the house, half the retirement accounts I'd already emptied, and a settlement of $150,000. I got shared custody of Sophie and my freedom. I never saw Evelyn at the hearings. David handled everything. I signed papers, she signed papers, and just like that, 12 years of marriage ended. I didn't feel sad about it, just relieved, like finally admitting a truth everyone already knew. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Evelyn. She'd called a few times over the last few months, usually about Sophie, scheduling changes, school events, the logistics of co-parenting. We were civil, barely. I almost didn't answer, but Sophie was with her this week, so it might be important. "Hello? Jonathan?" Her voice was different, softer, almost uncertain. "Do you have a minute?" "What's up?" She paused. I was wondering if we could talk, in person. There are some things I'd like to say. About Sophie? About us, about everything. I looked out at the river, at the boats passing below, at the city that had once felt like it was crushing me and now felt full of possibility. I don't think that's a good idea, Evelyn. Please, just coffee, 30 minutes. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a Starbucks in the Loop, neutral territory. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, nervously stirring a latte. She looked older, tired. The confidence she'd had when she handed me those divorce papers had faded into something that looked like regret. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. What did you want to talk about? She looked at her coffee. I wanted to apologize. I said nothing. I was cruel to you, Jonathan. During the worst time of your life, when you needed support, I abandoned you. I said terrible things. Her voice cracked. I told you that you were nothing, on your birthday. I've thought about that every day since. Okay. I was scared. We were losing everything, and I panicked. I thought if I left, if I got ahead of it, I could protect Sophie and myself from the collapse. But that's not an excuse. You didn't deserve how I treated you. I took a breath. You're right. I didn't. I've heard things. About your new company. About how well you're doing. I saw the article in the Tribune about Langston Freight Group. I'm happy for you. Really. Thank you. She looked up, met my eyes. Is there any chance? Could we try again? Start over? I know I hurt you, but we were good once. We could be good again. And there it was. The real reason for this meeting. I thought about the woman who changed the locks on our house, who'd served me divorce papers on my birthday, who'd told our daughter I wasn't a good provider, who'd loved me only when things were good and abandoned me the moment they weren't. I thought about Edward's letter. You earned this. Not by luck, but by being the kind of person worth investing in. No, I said quietly. No? Evelyn, you were right about one thing. When we were at our lowest, when we'd lost everything, I was nothing, not because I was broke, but because I let myself believe I was defined by my failures, that my worth was measured by my bank account or my business or what other people thought of me. That's not what I meant. Yes, it was, and you know what? It took losing you to understand that, to see that the person I thought loved me unconditionally actually loved me very conditionally. You loved me when I was successful. You left when I wasn't. I made a mistake. You made a choice, and you made it clear, so now I'm making mine. I stood up. I don't want to try again, Evelyn. I want to co-parent our daughter with respect and civility. But that's all. We're done. Jonathan, please. You said I was nothing. You were wrong, but it took you leaving for me to figure that out. So in a way, you did me a favor. I left her sitting there, walked out into the Chicago afternoon, and felt lighter than I had in years. A year after finding Edward's briefcase, I did something I'd been planning since the day I read his letter. I established the Langston Foundation. I funded it with $500,000 from the trust Edward had left me. Fitting, since that's how much he'd put into the trust to begin with. The foundation's mission was simple: provide grants and mentorship to small business owners who were struggling, who'd hit hard times through no fault of their own, who deserved a second chance. We'd review applications, conduct interviews, and select 10 people per year to receive grants of $25,000 each, plus a year of mentorship from successful business owners in their field. It was small, wouldn't change the world, but it would change 10 lives a year. And maybe those 10 would help 10 more, and so on. Pass it forward, Edward had said. I thought about him often, wished I could tell him how things had turned out, how his belief in me, even from beyond the grave, had saved not just my life, but given me something to believe in again. On the 1-year anniversary of finding the briefcase, I drove to Kansas City, back to Union Station, back to locker 243. The locker was empty now, had been since I'd taken the briefcase, but I stood in front of it anyway, looking at that beige metal door, and said a quiet thank you to a man who died 9 years ago, but whose impact rippled forward through time. A security guard walked by and paused. You okay? Yeah, I said, smiling. I'm great, actually. This locker, it changed my life. He looked confused, but nodded. Union Station's full of stories like that. People's lives changing in unexpected ways. Glad yours was a good change. Me too. I flew back to Chicago. Sophie was waiting at my apartment. It was my week with her. She'd made dinner with Marcus, the doorman's help. He'd become her unofficial grandfather, teaching her to cook and telling stories about growing up in Chicago in the 1960s. Dad, I made spaghetti. Well, Marcus helped, a lot, but I did the sauce myself. We ate dinner together, just the two of us, and she told me about her day. about her friends, about a science project she was working on, about a book she'd finished and couldn't wait for me to read. After she went to bed, I sat on my couch in my apartment that felt like home and thought about how far I'd come. A year ago, I was 50 years old, divorced, broke, sleeping on an office couch, and wondering if life was worth living. Now I was 51, rebuilding a business I believed in, co-parenting a daughter who was thriving, financially stable, and genuinely happy for the first time in years. I still had challenges. The business was still small, still growing. Dating at 51 was complicated. Sophie still struggled sometimes with the divorce, with splitting her time between two homes. But I was no longer nothing. I'd learned what Edward had tried to teach me all along, that your worth isn't determined by your bank account or your business or what other people think of you. It's determined by who you are when everything falls apart, by whether you get back up, by whether you help others rise when you're able. My phone buzzed. A text from David, my lawyer, who'd become a friend over the last year. Evelyn's lawyer called. She wants to reduce her custody time, something about a new job opportunity. You interested in more time with Sophie? I texted back, very interested. Set it up. More time with my daughter. More evenings making dinner together, more homework help, more movie nights, and Sunday morning pancakes. I thought about that briefcase, about how I'd almost thrown it away without opening it, about how close I'd come to never finding Edward's letter, never going to Kansas City, never discovering that second chance. Life changes in unexpected ways, sometimes in an instant, a diagnosis, an accident, a phone call that changes everything. Sometimes gradually erosion wearing away the foundation you thought was solid. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, life changes because someone believed in you, because someone took the time to leave you a map when you were lost, because someone invested in you when you had nothing left to invest in yourself. Edward Langston had been gone for 10 years, but he'd saved my life, and now it was my turn to pass it forward. 5 years later, March 15th, again, my 55th birthday, I returned to Union Station one more time. Langston Freight Group had grown beyond anything I'd imagined in those dark days when I was sleeping on my office couch. 40 employees now, with offices in 3 cities, Chicago, Kansas City, and Atlanta. We did $18 million in annual revenue. Not huge by Fortune 500 standards, we weren't competing with the giants, but stable, profitable, and built on relationships I'd spent 5 years carefully cultivating. More importantly, we were building something that mattered. We'd specialized in helping mid-sized manufacturers navigate complex supply chains, particularly companies transitioning to more sustainable practices. It felt good to do work that helped make the world slightly better, not just more profitable. The Langston Foundation had helped 60 people over 5 years, 10 per year, just as I'd planned. Small business owners who'd hit hard times through no fault of their own, a woman in Milwaukee whose bakery was failing after her husband died suddenly, a man in Indianapolis whose construction business had collapsed during COVID, a young couple in St. Louis whose restaurant had been destroyed in a fire and they couldn't afford to rebuild. We gave each of them $25,000 grants, the same amount Edward had put into that initial trust for me, plus a year of mentorship from successful business owners in their industries. 60 people, 60 second chances. 3 of them had gone on to become successful enough that they'd established their own charitable foundations, creating ripples of generosity spreading outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Edward would have loved that. Sophie was 15 now, a sophomore in high school. She split her time equally between Evelyn's house and my apartment. We'd found our rhythm over the years. She stayed with me Monday through Wednesday, with Evelyn Thursday through Sunday the first week, then switched the second week. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. She was thriving. Honor roll, volleyball team captain, more friends than I could keep track of, and a sharp sense of humor that reminded me of Edward. Just last month, she'd told me she wanted to study business in college. "I want to understand what you do, Dad," she'd said over breakfast one Sunday morning. "I want to build something of my own someday, something that helps people." I'd gotten teary-eyed right there at the kitchen table, which embarrassed her and made me laugh. I'd met someone, too. Her name was Claire Sullivan. She taught high school English at a school on the north side, and she'd been divorced for 3 years when we met at a charity fundraiser 18 months ago. We talked for an hour about books and teaching and second chances, and I'd asked if I could take her to dinner. We took things slowly. Both of us had been burned before. Both of us knew the difference between infatuation and something real. We built our relationship on who we actually were. 2 middle-aged people with complicated pasts, trying to build something honest and sustainable. Sophie liked her, which mattered more than anything. They'd bonded over young adult fiction and shared sarcasm. Last week, Sophie had casually referred to "when Claire comes over" in a way that suggested she was comfortable with this new reality. That felt like winning the lottery. I was 55 years old today, exactly 5 years since Evelyn had served me divorce papers and called me nothing, exactly 5 years since I'd found Edward's briefcase, exactly 5 years since my life had ended and begun again. I stood in the grand hall of Union Station during the morning rush on a Monday in March. The ceiling still soared 95 feet above me. The light still poured through those massive windows. The terrazzo floor still echoed with the footsteps of hundreds of people crossing this threshold on their way to somewhere else. Business travelers in suits, checking phones, pulling carry-ons, living lives full of purpose. Families with children, heading to visit grandparents or taking spring break vacations, the kids bouncing with excitement. College students with backpacks, headphones in, lost in their own worlds. Elderly couples moving slowly, holding hands, a lifetime of journeys behind them. Each person had their own story, their own struggles, their own moments of desperation and hope, their own second chances waiting to be discovered. I walked slowly to the locker area, that same dim corridor I'd walked down 5 years ago with shaking hands and zero hope. The lockers looked exactly the same. Beige metal, showing their age, numbered sequentially. Many still looked unused, dusty, forgotten. I found locker 243. Someone else had it now. I could see a padlock on it different from the one that had been there when I opened it. The locker was serving its purpose for someone else now, holding their possessions while they waited for their train, their life, their next chapter. But I stood there anyway, my hand resting on the cool metal, remembering the man I'd been 5 years ago. 50 years old, divorced, broke, sleeping on an office couch, wondering if life was worth continuing, so lost I couldn't see a way forward, so desperate I'd gotten on a plane chasing a dead man's instructions because I had literally nothing left to lose. Remembering the briefcase, the letter, the key, the impossible hope of it all, remembering Edward's words, "Get back up, Jonathan." One more time. I'd gotten up, more than once. Over and over, actually, each time a little stronger, a little wiser, a little more aware of what actually mattered. "Excuse me, are you okay?" I turned to see a young man, maybe 26 or 27, standing a few feet away. He looked lost, overwhelmed. His suit was too big, bought for job interviews probably. His shoes were worn but recently polished, trying to look professional on a budget. And he had that look, that desperate end-of-the-rope look that I recognized instantly because I'd worn it myself. "I'm fine," I said. "Just remembering, this locker changed my life once." He looked confused. "A locker?" "Long story. Are you okay? You look like you're carrying something heavy." He laughed bitterly. "That obvious, huh?" He set down the duffel bag he was carrying. "Just got laid off. 2 days ago. Tech startup I'd been working at for 3 years went under. I'm heading back to my parents' place in Omaha because I can't afford my apartment anymore. 27 years old and moving back home. Living the dream." I knew that feeling, that shame, that sense that you'd failed at being an adult. "What's your name?" "Marcus. Marcus Chen." "I'm Jonathan. Jonathan Hale." I pulled out my wallet and handed him my business card. "I know this feels like the end of the world right now, Marcus. Like everything you worked for just disappeared. I've been there, exactly there. 5 years ago, I was standing right here in the station at rock bottom, wondering if I should just give up entirely." "What did you do?" "I found out that sometimes when you lose everything, that's when you discover what you're really made of. That's when you figure out who you are when all the external stuff, the job title, the salary, the success, gets stripped away." He looked at the card in his hand. "Langston Freight Group, president." "You're hiring?" "Maybe. Send me your resume. What was your role at the startup?" "Operations manager. I handled logistics, supply chain, vendor relationships." "That's exactly what we do. I can't promise anything, but send me your resume and a cover letter. Tell me your story. If there's a fit, we'll talk." His eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." "Someone did it for me once. A man named Edward Langston believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, invested in me when I had nothing, gave me a second chance when I thought I'd run out of chances." I gestured at the locker. "He left me something in this locker that saved my life. Not just money, though that helped, but belief, hope, the knowledge that someone saw value in me even when I couldn't see it in myself." I don't know what to say. "Say you'll send that resume. Say you'll give yourself permission to get back up one more time. And say that someday, when you're successful again, and you will be, you'll help someone else the way I'm helping you now. Pass it forward." We shook hands. His grip was firm, despite the tears on his face. "Thank you. I mean it. Thank you." "You're welcome. And Marcus? This isn't the end of your story. It's just the end of a chapter. The next chapter could be even better if you let it." He picked up his duffel bag and walked away toward the platforms, his shoulders a little straighter, his step a little lighter. I stayed there for another moment, my hand still on locker 243, feeling Edward's presence like a warmth in my chest. "Well done," I could almost hear him say. "This is what it's all about. Not the money, not the success. This, helping someone else rise, passing forward what was passed to you. Well done, Jonathan." I thought about everything that had happened in 5 years. The pain of losing everything, the desperation of those weeks sleeping in my office, the terror of thinking I'd lost my daughter forever, the shame of being called nothing by the woman I'd loved, and then the miracle. The briefcase, the letter, the money that gave me the breathing room to rebuild not just my finances, but my sense of self. But more than the money, though I was grateful for it every day, what Edward had given me was permission to fail and rise again, to be broken and still be worthy, to lose everything and discover that everything wasn't nearly as important as I'd thought. My phone buzzed, a text from Claire. "Happy birthday, handsome. Dinner tonight? I'm cooking." I texted back, "Can't wait. I love you." 3 words I meant more deeply at 55 than I had at 25. 3 words earned through loss and rebuilding and learning what love really meant when it wasn't about what someone could give you, but about who they were when everything fell apart. Another text, this one from Sophie. "Happy birthday, Dad. Can we do birthday breakfast tomorrow? I'm making pancakes. Marcus is supervising." I smiled. Marcus the doorman had become family over the years. Unofficial grandfather to Sophie, teaching her to cook and telling stories about old Chicago. Small miracles everywhere. I texted back, "Wouldn't miss it for the world. Love you, kiddo." I took one last look at locker 243, said a silent thank you to Edward, and walked back through the grand hall toward the exit. The morning light was streaming through those massive windows, illuminating the space, making everything glow. Hundreds of people moving through their lives, each carrying their own burdens, their own hopes, their own second chances they didn't know were waiting. I'd come here 5 years ago with nothing, left with everything. Not money, though that had helped rebuild my life in practical ways, but something more valuable, the understanding that my worth wasn't determined by my bank account or my business or what my ex-wife thought of me. That being nothing meant I could become anything. That falling completely apart sometimes meant you could rebuild yourself into someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate than you'd been before. My wife had served me divorce papers on my 50th birthday and told me I was broke, old, nothing. She was wrong about the last part. I was never nothing. I just had to lose everything to discover what I actually was. And what I was, what I'd always been, was someone worth believing in. The end. But I stood there anyway, remembering the man I'd been 5 years ago, broken, desperate, ready to give up, remembering the briefcase, the letter, the key, remembering Edward's words, "Get back up, Jonathan, one more time." I'd gotten up, more than once, over and over, actually, and each time I'd learned something new about resilience, about worth, about what actually matters when everything else falls away. A young man approached the lockers, fumbling with a key, looking lost and overwhelmed. He couldn't have been more than 25. His suit was too big, his shoes were worn, and he had the look of someone carrying weight he wasn't sure he could bear. "You okay?" I asked. He looked up, startled. "Yeah, just looking for storage. Got laid off yesterday, need somewhere to keep my stuff while I figure things out." I knew that look. That lost, desperate look that said the world had just fallen apart and he wasn't sure how to put it back together. "What's your name?" "Marcus. Marcus Chen." "I'm Jonathan. Jonathan Hale." I handed him my business card. "Listen, Marcus, I know this feels like the end of the world right now, but it's not. Trust me, I've been where you are." "How'd you get through it?" I thought about that briefcase, about Edward's belief in me, about the long, hard road from nothing to something worth having. Someone helped me when I needed it most, believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and now I try to do the same for others. I looked at the card in his hand. "Send me your resume. We might have something at my company. And even if we don't, I know people. I'll help if I can." His eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "Someone did it for me once. I'm just passing it forward." We shook hands. He walked away with a little less weight on his shoulders, a little more hope in his eyes. I stood in Union Station, in that space between where people came from and where they were going, and felt Edward's presence like a hand on my shoulder. "Well done," I could almost hear him say. "Well done. I had been nothing. The world had torn me down to the foundation and shown me exactly how fragile everything I'd built really was. But I got back up, found out what I was made of when everything else was stripped away, discovered that being nothing meant I could become anything. My wife had served me divorce papers on my 50th birthday and told me I was broke, old, nothing. She was wrong about the last part. I was never nothing. I just had to lose everything to figure that out. The end.